questions, cooling is far more dangerous. Right at the moment, the statistical computer models and experienced solar physicists are telling us we're going to be cooling for 20 years. Get used to it. Don't try and stop it. So plan A is to stop it. And we're going to stop it apparently by having a carbon dioxide taxation. Well, plan A hasn't worked, it won't work, and it can't work. It hasn't worked because the Scandinavian countries, rather like Australia and New Zealand, sort of fancy themselves as environmentalists who will lead the world. So they were very early in the game, in the early 1980s, of introducing carbon dioxide taxation. Norway has had a $20 to $30 per tonne of carbon dioxide emitted tax since the early 1990s. What's happened to Norway's carbon dioxide emissions?
They've gone
Do
up.
you think they've gone down?
Not really.
Boy, what a gullible lot. They've gone up by 15%. Of course they have.
Do we know what they would have been without the tax?
15%. Oh, sorry, without the tax, no. But they haven't gone down, they continue to increase, that's the point. But I'm not saying that's an absolute number, obviously, your question's a good one in that sense. So, at that level of a $20 to $30 per tonne tax, it has virtually no discernible effect on your driving your car, which is the target of all this. Interesting that, because you'll then find out that when they're talking about introducing carbon dioxide tax here, they talk about $20 to $30 per tonne. When they're talking about it in the US, when they introduce it in Europe, more generally than Norway, 20 to 30, what's with this 20 to 30? Well, the answer is that the economists say, they advise the politicians, you can stick $20 to $30 per tonne on and people won't throw you out of office. That's a small enough sum, and it's a bit like the argument for Kyoto. We have to be able to, it's not going to have any effect, but we have to be able to show that we're going in the right direction, so let's just do it. The economists will also tell you that in order to be effective and actually cut and affect your usage and my usage of my third SUV, and I'm buying a third one next week, that tax has to be $250 per tonne. The Garnow report in the fine print had the scheme that Kevin Rudd was going to implement of the hook goes through the nose with the $20 to $30 per tonne, and then between now and 2050, allowing for inflation, it would be ramped up, that tax, to $250 per tonne. That was the intention. And at $250 per tonne, it might well be effective. It would also kill the Australian economy stone dead. So it's not going to happen. In fact, it's not even going to happen at $20 to $30 per tonne, we hope. Okay, so Plan A hasn't worked in somewhere like Norway. It won't work more generally. How do we know that? Because we've tried it more generally. We had the Kyoto Protocol, remember that? What did that cost? Nobody knows, but something of the order of $2 to $3 trillion. Have you looked outside the window lately? And did the climate change? I don't think it did. So what, we stood under the shower, we tore up $2 or $3 trillion notes for the Kyoto Protocol, and the effect on climate was zero. Well, the Greens will say, yes, well, we knew that, we agreed at the time, and they did. In the newspapers at the time, they said, yes, we accept. This will not have a measurable effect on climate. But it's the first step. It's like putting the frog in the warm water in the saucepan. Get him in there, and then turn up the gas. Okay, so Plan A hasn't worked, and it won't work, for those two reasons. It can't work, and it can't work, finally, because of the physics of the situation. The physics of the situation is this. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Yes, no scientist doubts that. What that means is if you put more of it into the atmosphere, there will be some extra warming. Yes, no doubt about that. The question is how much extra warming. Most people have this vision of a graph like this, carbon dioxide increasing this way, temperature increasing that way, and you all have a vision of a graph like that. It isn't like that. The relationship between increasing carbon dioxide and increasing temperature, and this relationship was established by the IPCC itself, this is from Bob Carter's opinion, the relationship is logarithmic, negative logarithmic. So as you increase carbon dioxide this way, initially, you get a very steep increase in temperature. But the curve does this and flattens out parallel to the axis as you get up to 3, 4, 5, 600 parts per million carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is a very powerful greenhouse gas in the first 50 parts per million in the atmosphere. By the time you're up here at 300, 350 parts per million, you can double the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and double it again, and the amount of extra warming is tiny. There's a very well-known phrase that we all use to describe the situation. You get less temperature bang for every carbon dioxide buck, every extra carbon dioxide buck. So that's fundamental physics. And what that means is it doesn't matter, you could stop Australia's industrial economy tomorrow, all of it, never mind 5, 10, 20% cuts. Stop the whole of Australia's economy, it will have no measurable effect on future temperature. Plan A. Hasn't worked, won't work, can't work. What's the cost of Plan A? Well, remember I said they were going to have a $20 to $30 per tonne carbon dioxide? What does that work out at over a year for the average family in Australia? Anybody have any idea? Family of 4, carbon dioxide tax $20 to $30 per tonne. What were the economists saying the number would be per family?
$3,500 per
Right on. Somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. Different economists, you know what they're like, lay them all end to end, they still wouldn't come to a conclusion. They have different numbers, but it's of that order. Several $1,000s per family per year. Extra tax, direct, off your family's budget. On top of that, there'll be the flow-through effects through the economy. The cost of energy will go up, everything else will go up. So on top of that, you've got an inflationary component. But the direct cost, $2,000 to $3,000. Well, that's fine. We pay extra taxes. I mean, it might sound a lot of extra tax, but we pay taxes. We get hospitals, we get roads, we get all sorts of benefits. And we're happy to do that, provided we get the benefits. So, Minister Wong, please tell me, and I've asked her this question, I've also asked CSIRO this question, I've also asked it in the New Zealand Parliamentary Committee of Inquiry into this, what is the benefit going to be? Goodness gracious me. Where do you come from, North Queensland? You know what the benefit's going to be. The benefit is we're going to stop a little bit of extra warming, because carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Oh, is that so, Minister? Well, I suppose that's true. Yes, it is a greenhouse gas. And yes, if we emit a bit less, remember Norway, but it'll be not quite as warm as it otherwise would have been. How much warming will be prevented, Minister, by this 20% cut by 2050, which is what they were talking about? Anybody have any idea?
0.6 degrees?
No? No? Orders of magnitude out. 0.0001 degrees centigrade. 1/10,000th of a degree. You can't measure it with a thermometer. And of course that's the output of an untested computer model, but it's the best we can do. So, do you know any Australian who's going to be happy to pay $2,000 to $3,000 per year, per family, extra tax, for an unmeasurable reduction in temperature in the future? I don't.
And if it does get colder, will they give us our money back?
Dream on. Well, I've already used the word headbutting, and he says, she says. I've been in this debate now for about 8 years in the public. I'm sick to the back teeth on it. I'm particularly sick to the back teeth of being insulted, being disinvited to meetings, and the time is long since past when there is need for a different approach. And that's Plan B. It is so unproductive to go on this silly argument that the computer models say the world's going to hell in a handbasket with runaway warming, when all the empirical scientific evidence fails to support that. And you've got a group of scientists that say that, and all you get is a slanging match between them. And as the gentleman down here said, I'm a member of the public. How can I possibly tell, except by saying, well, CSIRO's got a good reputation, they're more likely to be right than Bob Carter. That would have been true 20 years ago. I've got sad news for you. It's not true today. And one of the great damages that has come out of not just this part of the environmental debate, but the whole environmental debate, is the degradation it has caused in our scientific agencies. And by degradation, I mean the political manipulation of those agencies. So they no longer give proud, independent advice as they used to. They give advice that is politically acceptable. That's a very different thing. So, before I get on to Plan B, let me say there's no such thing as a global climate. It's a figment of scientists' imagination. It's useful for some sorts of academic discussions. Nobody lives in a global climate. You live in the climate of Sydney. You're worried, rightly, about the climate of Sydney if you're worried about climate at all. Whether there's more or less ice in the Arctic Ocean is quite simply irrelevant to you. So that's the first point to bear in mind.